All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kristen Torres, and I am a Child Welfare Fellow with the American Public Human Services Association. And we're very pleased to be hosting today's conversation on improving transition strategies for young parents aging out of care. A few housekeeping details here at the top. If you could please help us by muting yourself so that we don't have a lot of background noise, that would be great. I'm going to take a moment to provide a brief introduction to APHSA, provide some overview content on young parents and families, and then introduce our guest for our presentation today. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so please feel free to submit your questions in the chat as we go along, and then I'll be sure to read those out to our presenters. If you're not familiar, the American Public Human Services Association, or APHSA, is a bipartisan nonprofit membership organization, and we represent state and local health and human service agencies throughout the country. We also house communities in multiple health and human service disciplines, whose members are the administrators that operate agency departments in states and localities. Those disciplines and communities include our membership of SNAP directors, TANF administrators, child welfare administrators, chief information officers, and others. You can find more information on our website and our links to social media. And you can also sign up for our weekly health and human service policy analysis emails there as well. Next slide. So what we, along with our members and stakeholders, really work together to do is to influence modern policy and practice, build knowledge and capacity in the health and human service field, and connect members through our conferences and learning opportunities like today's webinar. Next slide. Our presentation today will focus on a unique population, young parents and families, specifically parents under the age of 25 with children under the age of 5. Today, 3.4 million children in the country live with parents ages 18 to 24, and disproportionately live in families with incomes below the federal poverty level with a higher utilization of human service programs. Additionally, we know that youth in foster care have high rates of early parenthood and face many parenting challenges. Approximately 20,000 young people age out of foster care each year, and this number is increasing at an alarming rate. We saw in the most recent APHSA data that while the overall numbers of those entering care decreased, the number of youth aging out of care rose by 14.6%. The young parents in and transitioning from the child welfare system face additional hurdles in their transition to adulthood compared to their non-foster and non-parent peers. Next slide. So as we discuss how parents and families are uniquely situated at the intersection of many of the health and human service agencies represented here today, we want to point out that while young parents do face unique challenges such as disruption in education, lack of access to quality childcare, or lack of parental supports, by taking a two-generation approach, health and human service programs have an opportunity to make a difference for families, both the children and parents. One such opportunity lies in the fact that this is a critically important developmental time for both children and parents, often referred to as two open windows. In that young parents are still developing vital skills and shaping their capacity to be successful adults and parents, as well as a window of opportunity to promote healthy development in the early stages of childhood from infancy to age 3. While young parents may experience greater obstacles than their peers without children or older parent households, they also have the capability of incredible resilience, creativity, and hope. We believe there are opportunities for health and human service leaders to better coordinate services and programs for this population. And we're really excited to hear from one partner today who is working to ensure cross-agency collaboration and continuity of care for young parents aging out of the system. Next slide. We're pleased today to be joined by our partners from Third Sector, Layla Bravo and Miranda Began. Third Sector is an advisory services firm that provides TA support to human service agencies at the state and county levels. We also have represented today from the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services, Lamar Smith and Candace Jones. Lamar is the director of the DeKalb County Department of Family and Children's Services. Candace is the director of the Georgia Resilient, Youth-Centered, Stable, and Empowered Chafee Foster Care Independence Program within the Division of Family and Children Services. Third Sector has been working closely with Lamar and Candace and their team for the past 9 months as a part of a national effort focused on helping public agencies better serve young parent families. I'll now turn it over to Layla to share some background on Third Sector's national effort before they walk through the Georgia case study with Lamar and Candace. Next slide.
Great, thank you so much, Kristen, and many thanks to APHSA for hosting today's session. I also wanted to thank the APHSA and Third Sector teams for all the effort that went into planning the content and logistics for today's meeting. Next slide. So just briefly, for those who don't know us, Third Sector is a nonprofit that provides technical assistance to state, county, and community agencies to implement systems change by linking public funding to the achievement of meaningful outcomes. We work with dozens of partners across the US to help them better use data to design, implement, and improve programs, facilitate stakeholder engagement efforts to include provider, community, and client voices in service planning and evaluation efforts, and help bridge silos between public agencies serving the same populations. In some of our engagements, we have helped agencies launch outcome contracts in partnership with or with input from their providers, which tie payments to specific outcome goals for priority populations. To date, Third Sector has supported state and local agencies to deploy over $800 million in public funding through these types of contracts. For example, in Ohio, we supported a contract focused on improving family reunification efforts. And in Washington State, we are supporting the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, the state's child welfare agency, in their efforts to bring a greater focus on performance measurement into their contracting. The goal in that effort is to ensure every contract measures quality and outcomes to better understand if services are truly improving the lives of children and families, and then to use that data in collaboration with providers to learn and continuously improve services. Next slide. Given the context Kristen shared on the importance of prioritizing young parents and their families, last year Third Sector began a cohort in the Southeast region focused on improving economic and well-being outcomes for young parent families. The effort is focused on developing customized programs, targeted policies, and aligning systems across human services and workforce agencies to better address some of the most common obstacles young parents face in achieving goals for themselves and their families. Since January, Third Sector has been providing technical assistance to the 3 states in the cohort and identifying common learnings to inform national recommendations for better supporting young families. Next slide. So before we begin the case study on how Georgia is better supporting young parents aging out of foster care, I'll briefly share an overview of the efforts in the 2 other cohort states. In Kentucky, the team is developing a stronger continuum of care for their TANF-funded Kentucky Works program. Third Sector is helping them identify and design enhancements to the program with a focus on better using data to understand and support young parents, with the key goal of empowering their frontline staff as leaders in this effort. In South Carolina, the team at the Waccamaw Economic Opportunity Council, a community action agency, is designing a pilot with individualized case management and coordinated wraparound supports to better serve their young parent families. Third Sector has helped Waccamaw review their current services to incorporate a 2-gen lens, and as a result, they are building new local partnerships to provide improved support for young families. They are also planning to incorporate young parent feedback in their program planning and evaluation processes. Finally, in Georgia, as you're here today, the Division of Family and Children Services has focused on designing a cross-agency pilot to enhance support for young parents aging out of foster care and who are opting out of extended youth support services. The team has focused on better using data as well as elevating the voices of young parents to identify and shape program changes to improve the transition process. Before I turn it over, I wanted to briefly mention that in addition to today's event about the work in Georgia, we have 2 more upcoming events with APHSA in October on the Kentucky and South Carolina stories. We're also developing some written resources with APHSA that will be shared broadly with all webinar attendees with more details on the work. I'll turn it over now to my colleague Miranda, who is leading our work in Georgia, to lead us through the case study with Candace and Lamar.
Great, thank you so much, Layla. So, I'm really excited that we've got Lamar and Candace here today to talk about all of the work that they've been doing in DeKalb County, Georgia, to really kind of enhance meaningful and authentic engagement with young parents aging out of foster care. And so just to give a little bit more context around the role that Lamar and Candace have played, you know, as was mentioned, Lamar Smith is the director of the DeKalb County Department of Children's Services. He has really been the champion of this project and has really connected us to the different partners that have been needed to really kind of get this work off the ground, both, you know, the engagement with young parents and some of the other efforts to improve the transition process for young parents. And, you know, one of the folks he's connected us with through this work has been Candace Jones. And, you know, her experience and efforts really, you know, working in youth-led engagement efforts through the independent living program really have given a lot of expertise and added a lot of value to this engagement with young parents. So really excited to have them here today and to enable you all to kind of learn from their experiences and the work that they've been doing. So with that, I will turn it over to Lamar Smith to kick off the introduction to the case study and the work that we've been doing, and then we'll go from there. Next slide. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, and Miranda, and good afternoon, everyone. This is a really exciting opportunity that we've been engaged with third sector really over the first half or the majority of this year. And so what you see here is certainly an outline of what we've been engaged in. And it's been an exciting effort to really get and support young parents who are exiting foster care at the age of 18. And so we wanted to strengthen the practice or our practice for these young parents as they launch from the foster care system. So we were very intentional in our planning around our internal strengths and opportunities to grow our work, in addition to bringing in external partners and players as well. And so in our system, we currently have what we call Extended Youth Support Services, which is a comparable program to extended foster care in about 32 other states around the nation. And we've identified young parents who have said to us at 18 that they no longer want to engage in the foster care system. So for us, it was really critical to say, how can we best prepare these young parents and their small children to launch and thrive into successful adulthood and parenthood and young families. And what was most critical also in DFCS, not only do we have child welfare, we also are responsible for family independence as well. And you all would be familiar with that through Medicaid eligibility, SNAP benefits, and TANF as well. And we wanted to really seize the moment and really take advantage of the opportunity that we had both program areas in our county department. And we really took the opportunity to bring in our partners from, we call it the Office of Family Independence, to really create a framework of collaboration. And what's important for you all to keep in mind here is, although the work that we are highlighting today is specifically focused on young parents aging out of foster care, we have built a model and a continuum of work where if you put in or you try to solve any other issue with internal collaboration, we believe that you can do so with child welfare and with the Office of Family Independence. But specifically today, we're going to talk about the work related to our young families and how they launch from the foster care system. And so again, we wanted to do that through a framework of collaboration with our partners in OFI. We wanted to enhance and support the work with our young people. And that begins from transition planning all the way to working with community partners and ensuring that we knew how our young parents and their children were doing. And that's crucial, and you do that through data sharing. And so you'll see here that's through the development of a data roadmap so that we can identify the priority outputs and outcomes of our young families. And so we're excited to talk about that today, to inform service delivery and to address other priority gaps for our young families. Next slide.
Great. Thank you so much, Lamar, for giving everyone that overview of the work. It's been really exciting to see it develop over time. And so I guess just to get us started here, wanted to kick it off with the first question here, which is, what are the most important learnings from this young parent engagement, and really how has this impacted the agency?
So what's key is a value of the Georgia Division of Family and Children Services, and we do continue to push that out at the CAB Department of Family and Children Services, is around youth engagement. Young people are central to our program development. We include them in policy development, program development, and the evaluation of both. And so what you'll see here is around, we'll start in the far left category, transition meeting preparation. So it was key to us that we have to be prepared with our young people around transition meeting. And the transition opportunity time starts at around 16 years of age, as we begin to prepare young people, and in this case, young parents, for their transition post foster care. And so we wanted to be intentional in what that preparation looked like. We wanted to be timely in that as well. And those opportunities look like, do we hold those transition roundtables early enough so that our young parents don't feel rushed, so that they can consider all of the opportunities and experiences available to them? And then we wanted to talk about transition meeting participants. Many times we feel like the more people we have around the table, the more productive and successful a meeting will be. What we heard loud and clear from our young parents, they wanted folks around the table who were meaningful to them. They wanted a case manager who they were familiar with. They didn't want a supervisor at the table who they never spoke to before, who they'd never seen before. So we wanted to be very thoughtful and intentional around who we had at the table. And so that doesn't mean at the time of planning, you just certainly have people who the young person may be familiar with. It also talks about, in our case practice and our practice model, how are we more intentional around engaging young people earlier, so that our young people perhaps are familiar with the supervisor of their case at 14 or 15, or that they perhaps are familiar with an OFI professional at 14 or 15, so that there is an authentic preparation at the time that you have a transition roundtable. So that was really some of the work that occurred at the transition meeting, or preparing them for that. And you'll see here in the right column, under the second block, advocates for the young parents should feel welcome and include supportive peers. In our policy for some time, we've had that peers should be present at the meeting. But are we really intentional about that? And what's our practice around that? And do we have transition roundtables at times and on days when we can ensure maximum participation from young adult peers or from parent peers? So that was another process that we looked at and that we engaged young people in as well. And we'll tell you that during this time of COVID, young people are very comfortable with the virtual platforms. So that was another consideration that previously we had not thought about before these times of COVID. And then finally, the communication and respect. How do case managers relay asset skills or asset-based assessments for these young people? That was a conversation that we had. And again, it relates to who's available at the time of the transition meeting. And so it was important for us, again, to relay at the time of the meeting who was there, how were we very in tune to and respectful around when it was time to assess the young parents' needs, that we had the folks there who should be there and could actually speak to, if there was a need, meet that need concretely for that young family, not only for the parent, but for the child. So Miranda, those were some of those key learnings that we had there.
Thanks, Lamar. Yeah, I think you really hit on a lot of the key learnings that came out of the focus group and the engagement with young parents. I think something that I wanted to emphasize about the work that you just spoke about is, a lot of these are super specific changes and tweaks to the process. And I think in many perspectives, they may seem somewhat simple, but I think something that we learned was that those small things and those small changes really do mean a lot to young parents, and they're paying attention to them, and they notice them. And so I think that really was a testament to the value of kind of hearing directly from them and letting that inform the changes and tweaks before doing that without getting their feedback. just wanted to know if Candace, if you wanted to add anything before we jump to the next slide.
Sure. Lamar touched on some things that I had just spoken with the group earlier about having people at the meeting. Our young people spoke very loudly about people that are foreign to them coming into meetings and giving guidance around what they believe is in their best interest. We understand what critical stages of development that young people are in, and then also young people that have been exposed to trauma and having some of those trauma brain responses to foreign people, foreign places, and foreign things. And so because of that, then they don't get the best out of the meeting because a young person is responding from a trauma brain. And so it's important for them to not spring things onto young people that they're unexpected and that they don't know is happening. And I think hearing that loud and clear for young people helps us to understand how collectively we as adults need to be mindful of how we engage with young people in these meetings and what they believe is valuable and important. Especially when in a meeting where you're trying to share power and create plans that are equitable, that are meaningful for the young person, and that also are sustainable, that they can actually follow through with. And so we need to make sure that we create a space of comfort for them to be able to think through that. If we don't do that, then young people are responding to us from that midbrain and from their reptilian brain, and all we get is emotion and emotive responses, which is unhealthy for them and ineffective for us to create some effective and long-term case planning that is healthy and fruitful for them and their child.
Thanks, Candace. I really appreciate that point. We can jump to the next slide. And so this question is really kind of around the initial motivation for engaging young parents aging out of foster care. And I think something to note about this work with you all is that this was something that was called out from the very beginning as something that needed to happen as we were thinking about reshaping the transition process and working more collaboratively with OFI, was that young parents needed to be at the table and we needed to hear from them. And so would love to hear from you all kind of why that was so important and share that with this group.
I think Candace spoke to it in her last response. To the extent that young people can work with adult supporters to be as thoughtful as possible and as intentional as possible about a life plan, that doesn't happen by accident. You have to be very intentional and thoughtful in your planning. So as we coalesced as a group, we began to think about how does this planning begin and where does it begin? And we began to identify that with young people, you begin here at 15 or 17, but when you have a young parent, there is a whole other dynamic at play. At this point, you want a young parent not only to begin to think about and plan for themselves, but to begin to think about and plan for themselves with their child and as a family unit. And that thinking looks differently and many times requires planning much earlier. And so we wanted to ensure that the transition planning process that happened here, that's illustrated here in stages 1, 2, and 3, were very thought out. They were already in state policy, but needed to be refined around how we executed in DeKalb County. And that's what you see illustrated here. And many times, young people who opted out or choose to opt out at 18 were expressing that to us, but we still planned with them as if they were going to stay with us till 21. So we knew that we had to be very intentional and plan differently for those young people as they would be launching at 18 with their young families. And so for here was a different type of decision-making process in addition to different players that we thought needed to be at the table, subsequently introduced to them much earlier. And so that's the process that you see outlined here. And we wanted to bring in our partners from OFI in this process and also expose them to trauma-informed training as well, knowing that this wasn't their usual book of business or their usual line of business. Candace, you want to share some more insight as well, please?
Yes, I think what we wanted to also do is create a framework of self-sufficiency rather than agency dependency. And so I'm a huge proponent of informed consent and letting young people know what's available to them as they're transitioning out, rather than them feeling as though they will be judged or viewed negatively if they had to return to the agency for support. But letting them know, hey, you may not need it right now or think that you need it, but it's available to you and that you have a right to access it, and that we're not going to judge you if you do have to circle back with us and look at getting those supports. I think engaging young people to tell us what that feels like is important, because youth lived experience, I can say I've never been in foster care, so I don't know what that feels like. And I think having young people tell us that, and then understanding from their mindset, from their mental models, what this process feels like, and creating a process that is wholesome and safe. I think if young people don't feel safe in processes, they don't take advantage of them. And I think, so creating that space and model where we do that informed consent and let young people know what's available to them if they were to opt out at 18 with a child in tow.
And there was also processes where when young people launched at 18 and they found themselves in need of additional support services, they may have found themselves lost when they returned to the system at the OFI door. So we wanted to be very intentional to partner with OFI to say, hey, maybe there's some additional questions you should ask when a customer presents to the office between the age of 18 and 26. Do you ask them, were you formerly in foster care? And if you get a yes, then we have an internal process to receive them and work with them to usher them through the process. One, so that they can be trauma informed. One, so that we can process work as efficiently as possible, specifically one around Medicaid. At some points in our agency's work, if a young person applied for one line of benefits, it could negatively impact their Medicaid eligibility in the other. So one, it was around specifically being more efficient around process, but also being very attuned to the young person and the young family's experience that now has led them back to DFCS's door.
Yeah, I think these are really great points, and I really appreciate kind of the background that you've given on sort of why it was so important to bring OFI to the table and to really focus in on this population. I think one thing I just want to emphasize is this point that was made around kind of proactive and intentional support of this population before they're aging out of foster care, to shift from a child welfare to a self-sufficiency mindset, and really seeing that as prevention work for that young person and their child, from kind of maintaining that self-sufficiency pathway and not returning to the child welfare pathway, if at all possible. And so just thinking about kind of that prevention work being a real key component of bringing OFI to the table. I think just wanted to make sure folks got that point.
And Miranda, that's critical. That's right. Certainly, this is not only an intervention at the point that the young person is in foster care, but it is preventative, as we certainly don't want the young child to end up in an episode of foster care. So certainly as this transition planning happened, and we're very intentional around it at 15, 16, and 17, the intervention happens there to then become a prevention to a young family having to have a child welfare intervention for that very young child. Yes.
Great. So I think now, kind of talking a little bit more about the work itself, I think we want to jump into some of the details of how the engagement with young parents happened over this summer. I think Candace.
Sorry, this is Layla. Sure. Real quick, just to make sure everybody's with us, would you mind just repeating again what OFI refers to and also EYSS on the previous slide?
Certainly. So OFI is the acronym for the Office of Family Independence. And here in the Division of Family and Children Services, that is where we handle our Medicaid eligibility, our SNAP, which is food stamps, TANF as well. And EYSS is Extended Youth Support Services, and that is our comparable program to extended foster care in Georgia.
Great, thanks, Layla. And if folks have other questions that are coming up in the chat, feel free to continue dropping those there. So yeah, Candace, if you wanted to give an overview of kind of the process that we took and who all was involved and kind of how we got the Young Parent Focus Group off the ground this summer, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. So we have a program here in Georgia called the Multi-Alliance Agency for Children. We call them MAC by short. That's the acronym that we use. And they have some other interlaced programs within their structure that support young parents, particularly. It's called the Teen Parent Connection program. And so we reached out to those partners to help us identify the young people that they were already working with to create that youth group that we wanted to get the feedback from. We utilized about 17 young parents to support us in that focus group, and 2 of them helped to lead the discussion as co-facilitators. One of them having being a young father. We purposefully engaged them and we prepared them for the meeting, let them know what types of questions that we were going to ask. I am a firm believer of meeting preparation for young people and helping them to know how to strategically share their stories to prevent re-traumatization. So we prepared them for the meeting, let them know what they, if they felt safe to share what they would like to share. And the purpose for us having the discussion, we really wanted them to know that the reason we wanted to talk to you was to help to build a better pathway for those young parents that have to come through this foster care system behind you. And so we reached out to them, got these young people who voluntarily agreed to participate with us. And what we did do was incentivize them. We used their lived experience to help us do this work. And so we believe that it's only right for us and fair for us to compensate them for their time. So we did do that. We reached out to them and developed the focus group questions, talked about what it is that we wanted them to specifically focus on and help us in the areas that we needed to have focus on in that meeting. We had those partners involved, and they really helped us to coalesce those young people, get them together, have us and help do the prep meeting with us, and then also have that fruitful discussion. We did a meeting separately with also our the 2 young lead co-facilitators to also let them know what we wanted them to do to help facilitate and the discussion. We recognize that with that peer interaction, young people tend to feel a bit more safer with sharing. And so it was I believe that was one of the most effective things, was having peers to help us to lead that discussion. So we allow young people to participate in their own way, in their own space. We had kiddos on the call, we had pets on the call, and we let them to engage and feel safe enough to share with us. And I tell you, when young people feel comfortable with sharing, then they are more open and willing to give you what they believe is what you need. And they really were. They were no holds barred. They didn't hold back with telling us what didn't work in the system, areas that we could improve on, and the things that did work well.
Great, thanks so much, Candace. Actually, if you want to jump to the next slide, I think a lot of the points that Candace hit on were really documented here. And I think, you started to kind of zoom us in on how this particular engagement was meaningful and authentic with these young parents. And I think a couple of the things that you highlighted so far, the way in which we, brought in, youth facilitators, worked with them to develop the agenda and the questions, and made sure that those would resonate. And I think some of the other kind of details around, the fact that folks were able to join from their own space, bring their kids along into the video. I think we even had some pets. Someone brought their pet snake. So that was an exciting detail. And then, I think, the youth-led component really did enable, folks to feel more comfortable, because the facilitators were folks who had similar experiences as them. So that I think helped a lot. I'm wondering if, Lamar, if there's anything that you want to add about kind of what the experience was like for you, and especially kind of coming from the government side, how this process, was really community led and community driven, kind of what that looked like from your perspective.
Certainly, Miranda. What's exciting about the way that we authentically engage young people is, at this point, they expect to be engaged. It is, at this point in DFCS, a core value of our work. What we see far too many times in government agencies is a frequent change in leadership. And I can really say at the Division of Family and Children Services, regardless of the division director, a county director, a program director, what is consistent is the manner in which we engage young people. They've come to expect that, our partners come to expect that. So when we have opportunities where we want to pilot a new initiative, or we really want to hone in on the way that we support young parents and their families, a lot of the groundwork has been paved simply because we have a core value that we exercise. It's just like a muscle. So we are familiar with this. Our system is familiar with the way that we work with young people, we engage young people. And so subsequently, you have young people who become more familiar with in the way that Candace talked about it, strategic sharing. Program directors aren't sensitive when they tell you that your division or your department isn't working best for them or what you can do better, because I've heard it. And they say it in a manner where even they perhaps want to be more considerate of how it is received. But the agency is now in tune to and works a muscle around engagement. And so that's exciting to see. And it's second nature here in Georgia. And we find that it isn't everywhere. But it doesn't happen by accident. It takes a lot of work. It takes trust with partners, because we certainly don't do it in isolation at the division or at the county level. You have to trust partners to work with your young people. And you have to trust your young people when they want to share information and create safe spaces for sharing as well. And when you get the information, that you'll do something with it.
I agree, Lamar. And if I could add, Miranda, I know we're cognizant of time, but it's important to let young people feel comfortable. And I think allowing our partners who already had established trust systems with these young people, lead the reach out to them to see if they were interested, and also coalescing them before they even engage them with us to talk to them about what is it that we're wanting, how they will be engaged, and what's in it for them. And so when young people hear also that you're wanting to improve the system for someone coming behind them, they are really, really, really interested in trying to do that, and are more likely to be frank and honest with you and authentic if they know that they're really trying to help someone else that comes behind them, and support us in making sure that young people who are expecting or are already a parent when they enter care to know what's available and what supports, and also how to use their voice effectively to advocate for themselves. And
Candace, I think you'll say the systems have to be flexible and nimble.
Yeah.
We talked about it. I think the focus group was scheduled for an hour, but things were flowing. We were hearing information. It ended up going an hour and a half. So you can't be rigid bureaucrats and say to young people, you had an hour. Thank you for what you had to say. We're done. No, they invested their time. They had their children with them. We want to hear what you have to say. I can move a meeting. My young people are important enough. I can move a meeting with an adult.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The conversation was so rich, we didn't want to end it either, but we knew we couldn't keep everybody on the line. But it was so rich and so engaging, and the young people really felt comfortable. I mean, you could actually visually see the shoulder drop, which is them getting relaxed and in the space and say, oh, you really are listening, leaning in and actually telling us their stories, their experiences. And even though some of the information was difficult to hear, they were honest and willing to share.
Great. Thank you both so much for sharing a little bit more about what that experience was like. And I think now just wanted to jump us to our last question, which is really just kind of hearing from you all kind of what the the plan is for moving forward. I think Lamar, you hit on this, that, this engagement with young people is now just the way Georgia operates. And so, I think, it's clear that that's going to continue, but if there's anything you want to share about kind of what the path forward might be before we shift to the open Q&A, that would be great.
It's to act on what we heard, not simply take it, write it down and put it on a bookshelf. We will act on the strategies and the information that the young people gave us. Those of y'all who aren't familiar with Georgia, DeKalb is a neighboring county to Fulton, which is in the Atlanta area. So young families can be highly transient. So we want to work with our sister county around how we work best with young people to scale out this work. So those are some of the most concrete things we can do. And certainly when we talk about continuous improvement processes, QA, what better way to get feedback on how well you're doing than to hear from your young people. So this was also an exercise in quality assurance for us and how well we're serving our young families.
Great. Yeah, great, Lamar. So I think what we'll do now is shift over to the open audience Q&A, which I believe Kristen will now facilitate.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. And we've had quite a few questions come up in the chat. So just a quick reminder, if you do still have a question, we still have time if you want to throw it up there. But first, this is for both Laura and Candace. I wanted to find out or just get your take. Given that agency silos are very common in many states and that strong partnerships are key in this work, could you speak to how the partnership with the Office of Family Independence, which oversees TANF programs, has strengthened this work? And how did you develop that partnership?
So physically, we work in the same building together. So that's one. But clearly, Ms. Carolyn Parker, who is the director for the programming for DeKalb, it's clear that we see families in the same space. So we know that we have to work together. In addition, when you begin to talk about community partners that serve families, we have to be very strategic in the way that happens. So Ms. Parker was a very willing partner in this, but I will say our state office was very integral in this work as well. So we had our TANF unit director at the state office who helped facilitate this work very early on, which helped shore up the flexibility and the information and support that Ms. Parker needed to help be a co-pilot in this work for me at the county level.
Thank you. We have a question from Rosemary. Is there a family coach through your OFI which works with young people as they exit foster care, or is there child welfare worker still attached to the case?
It's interesting you say that. The child welfare worker, an independent living coach, which is a child welfare worker, is still attached. But we talked about perhaps a new career ladder for OFI workers through this. We talked about them being exposed to trauma-informed training, which usually they don't get a chance to be exposed to. And perhaps this could be a new career ladder for them, preparing them for engaging young families who had prior experience or prior episodes of foster care.
And yes, young people still have access to their independent living coordinator. Even if they leave care, depending on what age they leave care and what type of permanency they've achieved, they still have access to their independent living coordinator and still contact them post foster care. They are state office, they are state staff, and we have a representative in each of our our agency regions, and in the DeKalb office we actually have two. So we do have independent living coordinators that speak with our young people as well.
Thank you. And you may have hit on, but I'll quickly just the next question. How does Georgia provide ILP services? Is there a role for the ILP provider or staff after a youth transitions to OFI?
Hopefully young people get connected to OFI before they age out. Now, I'm a huge proponent for young people staying in care, so if they need it. And so they definitely work with our young people from age 14 until they age out. And for some that could be age 21. They will have the same independent living coordinator despite where they are in the state. Now, they may be directly physically serviced by the coordinator that is in their physical place region, but they are, as far as their case planning and all of that other work, is done by the independent living coordinator for whom they've built a rapport and know better. And the independent living coordinator understands the young person's trauma history, their placement history, and also some of the other nuances to prevent some trauma triggers so that we can do effective planning with young people. And so they're connected to them and they stay with them throughout their stay in care. Again, if a young person leaves and returns to care, they still get the same independent living coordinator and they're reconnected to the person that they've been working with before.
Thank you. From Felicia, how has this process informed any future young parent engagement efforts that will occur from OFI, given the young parent's discontinuation with foster care? For both, either Candace or Lamar.
I believe it's informed the work specifically in DeKalb around how young people are engaged at the front door. So ensuring and informing, one, that we ask so that the OFI staff person is informed that this young person or this young family has history, foster care history, and then subsequently how they're navigated through the system related to eligibility programming. And also, if they haven't remained connected to their independent living specialist, a notification that a young person has presented back to the office again to get those additional supports that they may need, that they may qualify for and not know.
Thank you. From Samantha, I work with Teen Moms Unit with DC government. What are your housing options with OFI when the youth want to leave care early?
So specifically in DeKalb County, we are working with our housing authority around those vouchers. And that's work that we are engaged with the executive director to strengthen and make available to our young people. But that's still work that's in the infancy for our young people.
Okay. From Felicia also, is the Family First Program Director a role in a community organization or someone over your Family First Prevention Services Act?
It's a state director position and it's over the FFPSA work, yes.
Okay. And I think this question may be if you want for either Miranda or Layla to sort of reiterate, or either Candace or Lamar, but can you just provide the name of the model and sort of speak to the process that we're referring to today?
I don't know that it's a specific model that we used. I'm most familiar with the results-based facilitation or results-based leadership model when looking at a process or a solution to a problem, and which is how we looked at this. So being very intentional on the results. So it's not just simply how many, but it's what's the better off for a population. So that's the lens with which we looked at this work.
Yeah, I think just to add on that, we really started this work looking at kind of what are the ultimate outcomes that we want to see for young parents and their families as they're aging out of the system, and then kind of worked to kind of map out what some potential changes that could be made to kind of help move us towards those outcomes would be, and then really use this process of engaging with young people to both kind of verify some of those potential changes and also identify different changes or tweaks that haven't yet been identified. So really kind of taking a results first approach to what Lamar said to really identify the strategies that we should take.
Okay, you guys we have tons of questions, which is great. Can you talk a little bit about the continuous improvement process?
Yeah, and I can start to kick that one off as well, I think, and then Lamar definitely fill in the gaps. But I think what we've talked about, kind of taking that outcomes first approach, is also as we kind of map out what this pilot for a new transition process for young parents would be, is really having a process in place for understanding what's working and what's not working as it's implemented, and really being able to do that in real time, as opposed to kind of rolling it out and evaluating it at the end is really building in an infrastructure of looking at data, both qualitative data through feedback from young parents and conversations, but also quantitative data and really looking at what the outcomes are and what the process is resulting in, months or years down the line for young parents specifically. And so we've worked in kind of the rollout of this pilot to develop a bit of a data roadmap as well and start to build some partnerships with different data partners in Georgia to really kind of secure access to some of that long-term outcome data for young parents to kind of support the ongoing learning from this work.
Thank you, Miranda. This question is for Lamar. So given the session is primarily focused on young parent engagement, the young parent engagement component of your work, could you speak to how these efforts fit into the agency's broader goals to improve outcomes for youth transitioning out of care?
So it's interesting you said that we had to continuously honing in our work around young families. So for me, it is one around targeted universalism. So for me, it's around if you work with a smaller population and you ensure their trajectory as best that you can, really aren't you impacting the larger population? So for us, if we are working around a practice around timely transition planning that's happening, in this case, for young parents, ultimately, will our practice improve for young people transitioning out of care at large? And so we constantly kept that at top of mind for us. And in fact, we had to continue to hone our thinking in to say, hey, you all, we're talking about young parents here, but in fact, our thinking was parallel. There wasn't a time that we isolated our thinking to young parents and young families without keeping at top of mind about the population at large that was transitioning out of care. So it happened at the same time.
And I think if I could add so too, I think it also helps us to look at internal and external partners as a collective. Sometimes in child welfare work, we start to silo things and think, oh, well, that stuff belongs over here and it doesn't necessarily touch here. But looking at all of our partners as a collective, internal, external, looking at our external partners to get youth voice, looking at our internal partners to field what other resources are within our repertoire, within the agency that we can connect young people to, as well as those externally that we can utilize while young people are in care, before they transition out and when they transition out, so that we can give young people, to me, it's all about giving them informed consent to provide them services and let them know what those services are, and then let them cherry pick what services should be included in their case planning. And we can't do that without partners.
Thank you. This question is for Candace. How are the youth facilitators found and trained?
They were found by our partners. Our partners helped to identify the young parents that they were already working with. Because the Teen Parent Connection program through the Multi-Alliance Agency for Children here in Georgia is one of the programming that does that work, and they do it so well, who else are we to look to? So it was a no-brainer for us to look to them to help us identify who those young people were. And then they also knew who those young people, because they knew them so well, they knew who had the strength to serve as a facilitator and be able to do that collectively, which means that they had to not just make sure that they answer, that they field the questions to their peers, but that they also had answers to those questions as well, how to share their stories, as well as in helping their peers share theirs and doing it in a way that they can be heard by the adults. And so that's how we found our young leaders. And although I was familiar with a lot of them that were already on the line, that was not my role to determine who needed to be at the table. I wanted my partners to tell me that.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have time for like one last question. And so I just wonder if you might speak, Lamar, if you would like to speak to sort of how third sector, the role in this work has been in supporting your efforts in Georgia.
Well, I feel like we've been connected at the hip for the past 9 months or so, but a dynamic team in helping us get really organized around the thoughts, around a process, an informed process to do the work, what's been most exciting is, and I said this at the beginning of our presentation today, specifically, we've talked about preparing young parents and young families for launching from the foster care system. But I believe the model that we've developed with third sector can be applied to any opportunity that we have where we want to leverage child welfare and OFI partners and programming in our county. And that's what's most exciting to me as a county administrator, is really how do you apply success in one program area to another program area. And third sector was really key in outlining a model for us that can be applied for many solutions.
Excellent. Looks like we're kind of coming up on time, so I don't know. We have 2 more questions. I'm going to see if we can get those in quickly. Does the division have explicit policies regarding connecting aging youth to OFI, aging out youth to OFI?
Go ahead, Lamar. We don't have specific policies around how to connect young people to OFI. I think for us, it's who do we need to connect young people to, and what makes sense for us to connect young people to. And if that means getting them to OFI so that they can get those supports, then that's what we do. I think we don't have those explicit policies. That's why this model and this process has been so important for us to see if that's something that we do need to infuse in our work, and how we do that. Lamar, I don't know if you wanted to add something as well.
No, I agree. Probably the most closely related policy would be related to Medicaid coverage. But other than that touch point, Candace is right on point.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on. You've been such a robust group today. We'll try to get the rest of the questions answered for you.
Thank you all so much for your questions, and thank you, Lamar and Candace, again for being here with us today. I just wanted to take a minute to just quickly highlight a couple of the key points that I think were reiterated throughout the discussion today. I think to support the young parent population effectively, really understanding current needs and experiences and developing solutions to address those is key. And that is ultimately prevention work that is supportive of young parents and self-sufficiency, and preventing foster care involvement for the children of these parents as well. And so thinking about how to engage, really thinking about local partnerships, building on existing relationships is really core. Developing platforms for young parents to not only provide feedback, but also kind of be involved in the co-creation and, defining what the agency will be doing next. And then, lastly, just making sure to, engage with young parents in a strengths-based way so that you're recognizing the value of their feedback and compensating them appropriately for that. That was something that Georgia did really effectively. So we've loved working with this team, and I think, to Lamar's point, the process that was developed is something that we've worked with a number of government agencies to do, and we've had a fire team here in Georgia, but have loved getting to work with them. So I'll hand it back to Kristen to wrap it up.
Thank you. Yeah, we just wanted one more reminder. We have 2 more upcoming events in our work that we're doing with third sector. And so we'll leave those links in the registration for you when we send out the materials. But that's all we have for today. I also have the contact information available. We'll set that here for just a minute, and then we'll also send that around. But please feel free to reach out to us either at APHSA, third sector, and then our folks from Georgia that we're so grateful to have them here with us today. Thank you all for your commitment to these young people, and we hope that we're able to work together in the future. Thank you all for coming. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.